Peter, thank you so much for this insightful presentation. Now, if I could just ask you to take a seat.
Yes.
We couldn't just let you go from this stage without having a conversation, a chat with you. So I would like to now invite to this stage for a fireside chat with Peter, another great speaker, the moderator, Evelyn Buchatsky, the managing partner at D3. And D3 is a seed stage fund, and the name actually stands for Dare to Defend Democracy. So this is exactly what they are backing, the startups that dare to defend democracy. And Evelyn had a long and eventful career as an entrepreneur, an operator, an investor, and she spent a very significant part of it in Ukraine and working with Ukrainian companies. So I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. Please give a round of applause once again to Peter and to Evelyn. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so Peter, huge welcome to the first ever Resilience Conference in Copenhagen. As you know, today, Denmark is not only one of the most important and consequential allies of Ukraine, but it's also a key stakeholder in any conversation that involves strengthening the resilience of Europe in light of the threats. The threats have grown exponentially to Europe's security, stability, democracy, and even territorial integrity, and even from unexpected places. And IFO, under your leadership, has a lot to do, has been a big player in placing Denmark in this prominent position in the security conversation. IFO's motto, which is making the world's Denmark's business, is super relevant to the geopolitical situation today. So, with that said, let's get down to business. I have just a few questions, and I'll make sure I'm on time. First question. So, after a series of very bold and decisive investments into defense, how do you assess today, by the way, including D3, pretty bold, how do you assess IFO's defense portfolio today? What has worked particularly well? Oops. What has been challenging, and what are the opportunities ahead?
Thank you, Evelyn, and also thank you very much for the nice words. I would say that I think we got off to a good start, as I also alluded to in my keynote, because I also had a tremendous support from my owner, the government, and my board of directors, so we could work as a coherent team and take these risks that we believe were necessary to really get started, because it is a bit of a new thing to move into a business area that you have never tried before, and it takes a lot of, I would say, a lot of sense of urgency for everybody involved to get started, because it is. You simply have more stumbling blocks than you have opportunities at the beginning. But I would say that based on what we have learned so far, as I said before, I would like to see the defense and I would say defense industry in very broad terms become a significant part of our portfolio, both in terms of direct ownership and in terms of funds investments. And that is not the case yet, even though I think we managed to do quite a lot of interesting stuff. But in terms of volume, we're by far not there yet. And the one thing I could hope for us to really being able to expand in a productive way and really create some value, not only for us as an investor and a bank, but also for society in general, is that we become better in Denmark and I would say in our neighboring countries in Denmark, to foster the interaction and cooperation between the users and the producers. So the defense industry and the defense people, the investors and the defense. So this kind of creating this kind of ecosystem where you have constant learning and you have interaction and you have, let's say, a very direct way between good ideas, production and utilization. I think that is where we are still lacking quite a lot in terms of really using the potential that we are having in front of us.
Amazing. Now, I have to say that not every large institutional investor has been as fast and as bold as you are to essentially roll up the sleeves and take action towards defense. So a lot of them have this perception that they are constrained by ESG requirements, Well, I know that IFO is under the same requirements, yet you pushed ahead. So what is your advice to the pension funds and your peers, the other large LPs and endowments and etc. that feel like they cannot move in this sector because of ESG?
Actually, I remember I called ESG GDPR beforehand, but I think they're equally difficult to handle, the two concepts. So maybe GDPR is even this information sharing, which you basically can't share anything, but which means you can't do work. Now, ESG, I think I had a former colleague at IFO who used to say that in ESG, the S doesn't stand for social, it stands for security. And
I like that.
And that's of course a very, let's say, direct way to redefine what we should, which aims we should, and how the focus we should have. But I think there is an element of truth to that point, that today security resilience is actually part of having a sustainable and well-working democracy. And we have the ESG rules for a purpose. It's not only to make managers' life a bit more complicated. It's also because we all honestly believe that then we are pursuing these principles, the end result will be better. So I still at least try to force myself to think as a double S, both social and security, and then see if we can let's say define ways of getting through the stumbling blocks that we are having. And of course some of it is quite difficult to combine the principles in some individual cases, but in many cases they're equally supportive. So I think to some extent it's just about me being almost the older generation now in my business, being curious about the future, curious about changing my behavior, my attitude, my working methods, so they fit to the current challenges and the current opportunities. And I think if we do that on ESG, I don't think that's a stumbling block at all, honestly. It's obvious why we need to do something.
Yeah, I hope they feel the same way. Now, one of the biggest challenges for the defense sector right now is working capital financing. And a lot of these scaling requires capex, it requires working capital, substantial investments. So you have now this anomaly that early stage companies are having to raise huge rounds, which leads to enormous dilution of the founders or inflated valuations. So that's not a good situation for anyone. So what can IFO do to unlock these possibilities in working capital financing, credit lines, guarantees, such that the defense founders can count on that versus the equity funding, which comes with problems?
Yeah, I think that's a key question, because it is, in defense in particular, at the moment, you see some of the most tech-savvy companies are really expanding rapidly. And I completely agree that there is some kind of, what in other industrial developments, I know, let's say the wind industry, for example, you had like 20 years of development for getting from a small prototype onto large-scale rollout and the big capex and things. So the financial sector had time to get used to the changed identity of the sector. So they could do the equity at the beginning and then could start working a bit with some kind of small loans, some small credits and stuff. And then they moved into project financing, which was, let's say, complicated and meant billions committed over a 20-year tenor. We don't have that luxury in defense. It simply goes extremely fast. So we are in the situation where you have a company that you might have invested like $10 million a year ago, and then now they need a loan of $1 billion. And I completely get it from the point of the founders, that how do they keep control of the company without getting diluted? But on the other hand, to get value out of the company, you need to add the massive amount of scaling, and also to make it relevant for the ultimate buyer, at least if it's defense only. Then there is no question about it needs to be used in actual activity, and to do that you need scale. And you need a lot of items, and items are costly. What we are doing is that we are working with methods. I won't say it is a big problem for us, actually. Inflated valuation is a big problem for us, as it is for others. And the scaling is also a big problem. If we are working with a partner where we don't completely see how it is fully matured in terms of being able to scale, because scaling is just such a different exercise compared to the deployment of a new idea or a new technology. But what we're trying to do is, when we are having discussions with partners that are in this intermediate phase, we are trying to see if we can work with a combination of equity, and then we put the loan, and then we put maybe some part of the valuation at the back end of the actual scaling. So instead of deciding everything up front at day one, say, this is the valuation, and now you get a loan on top of the equity injection, then you can say that this is the valuation for now, then you get a loan, and then we do a new evaluation 3 or 4 years down the line. And then we have a mutual interest in the value creation. So it's not like me now getting the entire upside and you getting the downside, but we can kind of getting our incentives aligned, and then we can work together for a number of years, and then we can hopefully share the benefit at the end of a line. So this kind of trying to bridge the different, let's say, conflict of interest to some extent by dividing it into different stages is something that we are working with. We haven't tried it in practice yet, but we are very, very convinced that in theory it can work. But
It needs to work, yes. So some people argue that Europe could accelerate innovation and industrial capacity build up if it does what I will call here division of labors. What I mean by that is, instead of each country, each member state trying to address the entire defense tech stack, rather each member state focusing on what they think they could be best at. Of course, it's theoretical, but if we were in that stage where people are rational and they would go for a division of labors, what do you think Denmark can bring to the table in terms of defense tech?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
After the Danish position in the most valuable part.
The most valuable. I would agree. Yes, I would agree.
I think the other guys will say the same.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem. I think it's the best way to think about it, but it is actually deciding who gets what, when and how there will be a bit difficult. But I strongly believe that we have a very well-educated population. We can attract a lot of talent from the outside. We have a very, very efficient financial system, so we can provide a lot of capital. So I would argue that things that are complicated and capital intensive should fit well to Danes and the Danish economy. And then honestly, we all want industrial production at the end of the line and hopefully but Denmark is more of kind of an incubator and more of a country where you have to combine, I would say, good ideas with a lot of financial firepower. So I think all ideas and technological areas that fit into that equation, I think would fit well to Denmark.
Okay, that's a good segue to my next question. There is this new initiative called Build with Ukraine, which essentially means bringing the most advanced Ukrainian companies and technologies to share IP and co-produce in other countries. So if you could pick what technologies or companies from Ukraine would you like to invite to Denmark? What do you want to see coming from Ukraine to Denmark? And you feel free to, for open invitation to any company, if you...
Yeah, I will not mention any specific company, but I would say when you look at what our defense people are saying, and also some of the industrial actors, then of course they are extremely interested in things that have to do with surveillance, air surveillance, control of airspace. So I would say, I would say drones, but not drones in the narrow concept, but everything in this kind of technological ecosystem that provides you with a very efficient way of monitoring and controlling the airspace around your geographical area, and also if you're active at sea, for example, or if you're in the maritime industry, I think all these things that can be used for that purpose, both in terms of national resilience and security, and in terms also for protecting some of the key business areas we have in Denmark, I think that would be extremely useful for us.
Okay, great. So we run out of time. Just wanted to say that I want to say thank you for your fearless leadership, because quite frankly, D3 today is somewhat established fund, and we are very thankful for your signaling when you made the early bet on D3 because we went from being debanked by US banks to an oversubscribed fund with already 2 unicorns in the portfolio. We went from smelling like tobacco or being as unattractive as porn as an investment opportunity to being quite legit. So it's, you know, because of this level of bold leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Peter, for this great conversation. Thank you so much.